If you're new this morning, if haven't had a chance to connect with you, my name is Josh, and again, I'm the worship pastor. So normally I'm over here. Today I'm a little more over here and kind of here. So all over the place this morning, but it's good, and we're going to make it work. So this morning, have you been following us for the last few weeks? We've been in this financial sermon series called the ABCs of Financial Freedom. And so as we look at this, we've been looking at some different words, kind of following the first few letters of the alphabet, A, B, C. Today we're on letter D. So we've looked at letter A being kind of, attitude toward money. What is our attitude toward money? How do we feel about it? And that should be that it's all God's stuff. That everything is God's. Everything we have is God's. And that should be our attitude. We looked at letter B, and B being this bondage to finances, specifically maybe debt. That most American households have way more debt than any of us should. And it's tough. And the scripture says that the borrower is slave to the lender. That we see that idea of bondage in scripture. That when we bog ourselves down with so much debt, so many loans, we feel enslaved, chained up to all these bills. And it's tough. And last week we looked at letter C, that we made this choice to tithe, to look at God's plan. And this morning we're making another choice, making a decision to accept God's plan. That God's plan is the best plan. And if you're like me, which doesn't take a whole lot to make a bad decision, we've probably made our handfuls of bad decisions in our life. I'm sure of it. But because we don't have all morning to dwell on those, let's just think a little bit about the bad financial decisions we've made. Regardless of bad decisions as a whole, what about bad financial decisions? Now, I'd like to say, I feel like it's been a little while since I've made some bigger bad financial decisions. There's been some times where it's like, okay, we needed this as a household, but maybe we should have waited another week to get it because it made that month a little tougher. Even though the money was there, maybe there was another bill we had to pay. But certainly when I was going to college, and you've got this decent job, and you feel like you're making a bit of money, but in the meantime, you're trying to go to college. And I know it's tough to go to college without taking loans. Kids, start saving now. If you're thinking of going to college, start saving now. You'll not regret it later. So when I started going to school, and I went to 2 years of community college, and then I went to 4 years of Bible college, which that's definitely not cheap. 6 years of school under my belt. And in the meantime, I need a new vehicle. So I've got all these student loans, and I should be paying more for my schooling while I'm doing it. Instead, I'm playing paintball and kind of frivolously kicking my money around on my hobbies, which is fun. You need a little bit of fun, otherwise you just go crazy. But in the meantime, my priorities were so messed up that I'm still paying for a lot of that schooling today. And in the midst of all that, I bought myself a new vehicle, which I did need. And that vehicle lasted me a while. We just got rid of it. And I bought it in 2004. But I didn't need a 2004 vehicle in the year of 2004. I could have got myself something far cheaper, a little bit older, and probably had a lot more breathing room in that time of life when I needed it. So you go to college, and especially Bible college is really known for hooking up. You get all these Christian kids who are trying to figure out how to handle their emotions and hormones, and a lot of girls who are supposedly going to college to get their MRS degree, to get their Mrs. title. And I'm going to Bible college, and I'm in the lunchroom getting my lunch, and across the lunchroom I see this pretty girl. And I go over and I introduce myself to this pretty girl because I want to be more than just Facebook friends with this pretty girl. And we get talking and hanging out, and one thing kind of goes to another, and it's like, hey, I really like this pretty girl, and we got a lot in common. Hey, we should date. And well, dating costs money, and you want to go on dates, and you want to treat her like a queen and things like that. And eventually I just said, hey, I like pretty girl. I want to put a ring on it. Oh, rings aren't cheap. Again, and especially guys, and there's maybe just a few of us. Guys, if you're not married yet and you're looking to do that one day, save up some money, because to put a ring on a credit card, it's a bad idea. It was worth it. It was worth it, but it was way more expensive than it should have been. Okay, so I put this credit card, Hellsberg, thanks. Put this ring on a credit card that ended up costing more than it should have, and then you want to take pretty girl on a honeymoon, and even though some friends of pretty girl gave you their timeshare, you can go about anywhere in the world for free, which was awesome. You have to pay to get to anywhere in the world. So it's like, okay, where do we want to go? And we found some pretty modest tickets that took us somewhere pretty nice for our honeymoon. But those tickets ended up going on a credit card. Hey, thanks, Capital One. You were in my wallet for way too long. So needless to say, I made some kind of bonehead decisions when it came to finances back in the day, and it made that first couple of years of marriage pretty tight on the pocketbook. But part of those bad decisions reeled me in one of my best financial decisions in marrying my wife, Amy. Because in marrying her, opposites definitely attract, and in those opposites, we definitely have a different idea of how to save and or spend money. I'm the spender, she's the saver. She grew up in a pastor's home, 4 kids, single income family. I'm grateful God sent me her, because otherwise I'd probably be breaking our bank account on Nerf guns and music equipment and other dumb things that I definitely don't need. So to know that I have to keep myself in check when I get home, and guys, you're probably with me. If you're married and you come home and you've got that thing and your wife's like, she gives you that look, like, why'd you buy that? You know the look. You've gotten the look. And so it's that look that kind of helps keep me at bay to say, okay, nope, I don't need one of those because I've got 5 of them already. I don't care how cheap it is. I don't need it. So God is looking out for me in that sense. And even though Amy brings that to the table, she also brought it to the table, her 4 years of Bible college expenses as well. And we've been whittling those down nicely. God's been taking care of us. And I think 2 weeks ago that we celebrated our anniversary in moving to Columbus, that it's been 2 years since we've moved here. It's been amazing to see how God has taken care of us, not just marital-wise, but just taking care of our family financially since we've moved here. Because when we were looking at this idea of moving to Columbus, and not that it was the community, but God, you're telling me you want us to move to a community where we're taking a salary that's a third of what we had at an established church, that you want us to write support letters and ask people for money, because that's awkward, and that we might have to get a second job on top of it, and we've had to do all those things. But church, I wouldn't trade it for the world, because ministry is so much fun that we're loving every minute of it. We're exhausted. Our girls hate sleep, but man, this is the dream right now, and God has provided the whole step of the way. Because initially, when we're looking at this step of faith and saying, man, this looks like a great situation, starting something brand new, this entrepreneurial mindset that I've had for a long time, thinking of maybe one day I wanted to start my own business. Well, how about instead you start a church and you become a church planner? God, that's all crazy talk. We're in. Because at that time, this seemed like the best fit, and it still is. And we're glad to be here. And God has, again, blessed us the whole step of the way, that since we've moved here, God has allowed us to upgrade our family from a family of 3 to a family of 4. Hey, we have another kid on the way. What are we going to do with that? Where are we going to put it? We've got this tiny little duplex that somehow we miraculously found on a weekend that we randomly visited here. I guess we're moving here. I guess we're needing to find a bigger home because we got another kid on the way. Hey, God provided a bigger home. Cool, we upgraded a bigger home. Hey, now we have another room for our daughter and room to grow for maybe even a 3rd kid. And we can do grow group in our home. And because we got this extra kid, my tiny little 2-door Chevy Cavalier that I'm trying to fit all this church planning stuff in, that doesn't work too well. Hey, here's some extra cash. You just sold your car. Now you have enough cash that you could buy at least a new vehicle to me, outright, on cash, no loans, and it's paid for. God's been good. Now, I don't want to give you the wrong idea. Amy and I aren't making it rain dollar bills at home. We're not bathing in money. That's crazy. We're not. But God's been good. And I think it's all because we've been trusting Him along this journey that He's continued to provide and give to us and give us what we need. So we're looking at this financial series, and today we again talk about this letter D, decision. And we're making a decision. And again, 2 years ago, we made this decision to move to Columbus. And it was a crazy decision. And you might think as we studied God's Word, and He's calling us to give back to Him and saying, I want you to trust me with a portion of what I've given you. It's mine anyway. You're writing essentially a check out of my bank account, even though it doesn't feel like it. That sounds like crazy talk. This morning, church, I want us to look at another story in Scripture that seems kind of crazy. We're going to the Old Testament, to the book of 2 Kings, to look at the story of a man named Naaman. So if you've got one of these Bibles that are in the chairs next to you that we've provided, it's on page 199, 2 Kings chapter 5, starting at verse 1. And this isn't necessarily a story about finances, but it's a story of a man who's definitely got a problem. And as maybe for you and I, we've got this problem of debt. We've got this problem of financial insecurity. As we've been playing this goofy song every Sunday morning, Family Force 5, from paycheck to paycheck, we feel like that's how we're doing life. And for some months, it probably is. And I'd say that's kind of a problem. So Naaman's got this problem that we're going to read about, and I want us to understand how he handles it and to look at some lessons we can learn from Naaman out of this story. So 2 Kings chapter 5, starting at verse 1. It says, Naaman, commander of the army of the king of Syria, was a great man with his master, and in high favor, because by him the Lord had given victory to Syria. He was a mighty man of valor, but he was a leper. Not leopard, a leper. Okay, if we're unfamiliar with that term, here's what essentially this means. He's a great dude, he's a good soldier, he's valiant, he's whatever. He has a crazy skin disease that makes his skin break out in all these nasty sores. We think zits and cold sores and things like that are bad. This is terrible. Because not only do you look funky, you have to walk around your community basically declaring you're unclean. So that as people pass by you, they know not to touch you. You're kind of an outcast. You almost have your own community. You had leper colonies. It's like, let's take everybody with this bad skin disease and put them in their own little territory so they don't infect everybody else. That was leprosy. It was no bueno. Let's move on. Verse 2. Now the Syrians, on one of their raids, had carried off a little girl from the land of Israel, and she worked in the service of Naaman's wife. She said to her mistress, would that my lord were with a prophet who is in Samaria, he would cure him of his leprosy. So Naaman went in and told his lord. Thus and so spoke the girl from the land of Israel. And the king of Syria said, go now, and I will send a letter to the king of Israel. So he went away, taking with him 10 talents of silver, 6,000 shekels of gold, and 10 changes of clothing. This guy's not hurting, church. And he brought with the letter to the king of Israel, which read, when this letter reaches you, know that I have sent to you Naaman my servant, that you may cure him of his leprosy. And when the king of Israel read the letter, he tore his clothes and said, am I God to kill and make alive, that this man sends word to me to cure a man of leprosy? Only consider how this man is seeking a quarrel with me. But when Elisha the man of God heard that the king of Israel had torn his clothes, he sent to the king, saying, why have you torn your clothes? Let him come now to me, that he may know that there is a prophet in Israel. So Naaman came with his horses and chariots and stood at the door of Elisha's house. And Elisha sent a messenger to him, saying, go and wash in the Jordan 7 times, and your flesh shall be restored, and you shall be clean. But Naaman was angry, and he went away, saying, behold, I thought he would surely come out to me and stand and call upon the name of the Lord, his God, and wave his hand over the place and cure the leper. Are not Abana and Pharpar, the rivers of Damascus, better than all the waters of Israel? Could I not wash in them and be clean? So he turned away and went away in a rage. But his servants came near and said to him, my father, it is a great word the prophet has spoken to you. Will you not do it? Has he actually said to you, wash and be clean? So he went down and dipped himself 7 times in the Jordan, according to the word of the man of God. And his flesh was restored like the flesh of a little child, and he was clean. Verse 15, I want us to catch something here. It says, then he returned to the man of God, he and all his company, and he came and stood before him, and he said, behold, I know that there is no God in all the earth but in Israel. So accept now a present from your servant. So we see this man Naaman, and we see he's got a problem. Again, it's not a financial one, but it's a problem. When you have your own colony of people, you got this nasty skin disease, I'd call that an issue. So what does he do with it? What lessons can we learn from Naaman this morning that can transpose to our financial situation? Number 1, no one is immune from problems. No one is immune from problems. Everybody can have problems. I've heard the rapper Jay-Z, he said he's got 99 problems. That's a lot of problems. But we see in verse 1, we read it before we hardly got into anything else. And he said, he was a mighty man of valor, but he was a leper. So we can say today, it doesn't matter who we are. You can say, well, he's the best dad, he's the best father of the world, but he buys everything he wants on credit. He or she, they're a great business manager, a great leader, a great CEO. They run a Fortune 500 company, but they got a gambling problem. And they just piddle their money away at the casino. Fill in the blank. It doesn't matter who we are. It doesn't matter if we are that CEO, if we are a great father, wife, whatever, if we're the coolest church planner in the world. We're all susceptible to problems. He had this problem of leprosy. What's our problem this morning? We're talking about finances. Odds are good there's a few of us in the room that have got some debt, that have some financial issues, that we might be up to our eyeballs in debt, whether it's credit cards or loans or whatever, that we're struggling. I'd call that a problem. No one's immune. We have our job today. Next week we may not have our job. Who knows? Anything can happen. So no one is immune from problems. The second thing we can learn from Naaman is that God will use the most unlikely source to get us what we need. In Naaman's home was this little kidnapped slave girl from Israel that Syria, and going on to one of their raids, kidnapped this poor little girl, brought her back, and she happens to be working in Naaman's home. And she gives word to his wife saying, hey, if my master were in Samaria, there's a guy there that has information on how he can take care of his problem. He wouldn't have to be a leper anymore. This odd little slave girl that was kidnapped, that's away from home, brings the solution to Naaman's problem. There's 100 places that we could go, some of which are right in our own community, that could give us advice on finances. Guys that spend a good chunk of their lives studying business management, studying finances, studying how to save money in your IRA or whatever, that could give you financial help. But how odd is it, church? How countercultural is it that we are finding advice in God's Word on how to manage our funds? That God has something to say about how we manage what's His. Now again, we say it as a church, we don't necessarily like talking about finances. We don't enjoy it, but we can't ignore it. When we look at Jesus' teachings and we see that Jesus talks about finances more than heaven and hell combined, that's a big deal. When we see that Jesus, in 11 out of 39 of his parables, talks about finances, that's a big deal. Over 800 scriptures throughout the Bible that talk about finances, church, we have to discuss finances. So it might seem odd that we're finding information on how to manage our finances from a church that's maybe an unlikely source that we weren't expecting. God will continue to use these unlikely sources to get us what we need. Could be a friendly neighbor. Could be just somebody from within the church. We're going to get what we need, even if we don't expect it from where it comes from. The third thing we can learn from Naaman is that the answer to our problems won't usually be what we want to hear. The answer to our problems won't usually be what we want to hear. Once Naaman got word, not even from Elisha himself necessarily, but this messenger that came to the door to greet him, he got this word saying, hey, you need to go down to the Jordan River there in Israel, and you need to wash yourself 7 times. That sounds ridiculous. That's what's going to cure me? Are you kidding me? That river's filthy. Why would I need to dip myself in any river, let alone that one, to clean myself of this nasty skin disorder? But that was the solution. There might be several occasions in our life where we have an issue, and we might already know what it's going to take to solve that problem, but we don't like the solution. Maybe we hear that, well, there's maybe some weight we could lose, that we could be in better shape. Well, maybe we need to get on the treadmill and get off the Twinkies. Running is terrible. I get shin splints like crazy, having to get the right shoes. I don't want to spend $150 on a pair of shoes, but if that's what it takes, that's the solution. We get word from the doctor that we've got a terminal illness. You need lots and lots of chemo. You need lots and lots of prayer and patience as you work out this cancer. That sucks. We've got a problem, and here's the solution. But I guarantee you, we're going to take that solution, if that's what it means, to get ourselves better. Again, we're swimming in our eyeballs in debt. We need to quit buying things we can't afford. We need to start saving some money. We need to shift our priorities a little bit. Naaman didn't like the solution to his problem. A couple thoughts that might help us in regards to our finances. And maybe those solutions aren't going to be ones we like, because it means we're not as happy as we normally are. One of them being delayed gratification. It's this idea of waiting for what you want until later. Instead of, hey, I see this thing and I want it now. And I might be a little old school for some of us, but I grew up watching the original Willy Wonka movie with Gene Wilder in it. And you've got this little British girl who wants a golden goose, the goose that lays the golden eggs. Okay, seeing some of you nodding your heads, some of you are tracking with me. But Daddy, I want the golden goose. I want it now. There's times where I definitely see that thing on the shelf. And again, I might have 5 of them already or have something similar to it. It's like, I know I don't need that. Or if I really want that, I'm going to have to wait. I'm going to have to save up to get that thing. A few years ago, I started doing some volunteer work, or at least what I thought was going to be volunteer work, at a rehabilitation center for youth, doing some Bible studies. And all of a sudden, I start getting this check in the mail from them. It's like, hey, I guess this is a paid gig. Cool. So we were getting this extra income coming in that we didn't expect. And I was definitely leading some worship at the time, and I talked with Amy and said, hey, I'd like to get a new electric guitar, because the one I've got's pretty old, and it's kind of a special sentimental piece, and I'd rather not ruin that if something happens. Can I save up this money and buy a guitar? Sure enough, she said I could, and so it was about 8 or 9 months that I saved up to get a pretty good chunk going. It's like, this is probably going to be a once-in-a-lifetime kind of a deal, where I can actually buy a decent guitar that's going to last me, hopefully, a long, long time. And it was totally worth it. I appreciate it more than I would have then had I just took a credit card and swiped that machine. And ended up paying a few $100s more for it than I should have. Delayed gratification. Maybe it's a priority shift, that we're spending some money on some stuff that we really like and we feel like, well, I can't live without that. Maybe we can. Maybe you're getting that tall or that venti, fat-free, sugar-free, taste-free caramel macchiato from Starbucks every day, and you're spending $5 or $6 on a drink once a week, or once a day. Maybe it should be once a week. That's expensive. You could feed a kid in a foreign country for a month based on what you spend on coffee in a week. And that's just one example. Maybe it's going out to eat. Where can you look at your priorities and cut back on some of those things? I know for me and my family, we definitely try to cut the corners and cut some costs in places that we don't really necessarily need and we really could live without and don't mind living without. But according to the rest of the world, it's like, man, how can you not have cable TV? Well, when you don't have time to watch TV, why am I going to pay for that? Why am I going to pay another $30, $40 a month for dish TV or a cable that I'm not even going to have a chance to watch? So we got maybe $7, $8 a month that we're spending on Netflix. That's our entertainment. We have one TV in the house. That's it. By the time our girls finally go to bed, and they hate sleep right now, so 9 o'clock, 9:30, say, hey, we've got 30, 45 minutes to watch TV, and it's time for us to go to bed because we're exhausted. For our cell phones, we bought some used cell phones on Facebook, hooked them up to a kind of a prepaid month-to-month plan with Verizon. We spend $50 a line on cell phones. That's significantly cheaper than what Verizon is going to try to sell you on. Straight Talk, whatever it is, that's an option where you get just about as good a service and you're spending half the price. Amy develops a meal plan every month to kind of lay out what are we going to eat, what are the big meals that I'm going to make. We go to the grocery store, we make one big trip, try to buy everything we need for the month. Sure, we have to go back periodically and, well, maybe we need some milk here or there, a couple other little things that come up. But then we go to the store even less, and then those impulse buys don't end up in the cart like they usually would. There's ways we can cut corners. There's ways we can nip off some of these, what we think we need expenses, and to live without, even if it's for a time. We may not like it, but it might be what we need. The fourth thing we can learn from Naaman is that just like he didn't like the solution to his problem, that often leads us to coming up with our own solution. So we might be tempted to come up with our own plan. Naaman was asking Elisha. He was stomping off in a tantrum, saying, I don't like this idea. He went away angry. Why can't I bathe myself in these rivers back home? in Syria. They're better anyway. They're cleaner. They're prettier. Why can't those work? This dirty Jordan River? Are you serious? That sounds silly. So he wants to come up with his own plan. Again, if we've got a problem, if we're told here's what it's going to take, and you know that's what it's going to take, why wouldn't we do it? If we're drowning in debt, we think, well, I don't like God's plan because it seems too risky. It seems too ridiculous. I'm going to tweak my own plan. Odds are good, whatever your financial situation is, it's been part of our plan that's brought us to that solution and problem. So we need to come up with a better plan. We need to look at God's plan. And just as Naaman had these friends, point number 5 that we can learn from Naaman's life, Naaman had these wise friends that encouraged him to do what God said. They reminded him, hey, didn't this prophet tell you, wash and be clean? Like, you're going to get rid of your leprosy, Naaman. Why wouldn't you do it? You know, in his book that we've been following through this sermon series, Barry Cameron, the writer of ABCs of Financial Freedom, he said one of the surest ways you can tell true try friends is they will always tell you what you need to hear, whether or not you want to hear it. Church, I hope you have some friends in your life that are like that. I hope you've got some friends or family members that even though, man, it's tough love, and sometimes bringing that tough love is just that, it's tough. You've got people in your life that help bring you back down to earth to say, here's maybe what you really need to do. I know you don't like it, but here's the solution. And as the church, I hope we can be that for each other. That as one of our core values is to love, that we can come and gather together to love and encourage one another, to support one another, and to bring that truth home when we need it for one another. Lastly, we see lesson number 6 that we learned from Naaman is that God's way is always the right way. That he went down to the river, he washed himself, and he came out with this pure porcelain skin like a child. And I'm sure for us, even if it was that issue or a financial issue, if somebody told you today, if you had a word from God that, hey, you go down to the Platte River and wash yourself, and you're going to come out with skin like a little baby, if I could have skin like my 8-month-old, I'd do it just for that alone. Sure, how many times do you want me to dip myself? Let's go. There's a party on the Platte. The sandbar's hopping. But that God's way is always the right way. Church, we need to be obedient. God is calling us to this point of obedience, to trust Him with our finances. And obedience always takes 2 things. Number 1, obedience takes this thing of faith. And we've been singing this song for the last couple weeks, this last month. Give me faith to trust what you say, that you're good, and your love is great. It takes this faith. Can I trust God to do this? But the next thing it takes is it takes faithfulness. It takes us committing. Can God trust me to follow through with this plan? In his book, Barry lists out in this chapter 7 simple strategies to get out of debt. And we'll put this on the screen, but I want us to just talk through a couple of them briefly. The first point that Barry mentions is to trust God. We read in Matthew 6:33, Jesus says, but seek first His kingdom and His righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. Church, I ask you this morning, what are we seeking after? Are we seeking after the same thing that the rest of the world is seeking after? That next relationship, that next best thing, that next new car, that next new job, a better paycheck and salary? Are we seeking after the kingdom of God? Are we seeking after true fulfillment in this relationship with Christ and finding God's righteousness? And it says, God's going to provide. He's going to give us all of these things. The second thing we need to do is we need to tithe. We need to trust God, and based off of that, we need to tithe. We need to give back to God. I want to do some simple math with you this morning because anything more than this is going to hurt my brain, and it's been a long morning already. So let's do some simple math. According to Wikipedia, the average household income is about $50,000 or $55,000. That might sound like a joke. We might be laughing. I wish that was my household. I wish it was my household. So that seems like a lot. Let's bring it down a little bit. Let's say the average income of an American household is $35,000. That's roughly $3,000 a month. Now when we look at this word called a tithe, when we give back to God, when we give Him a tithe, this word tithe means 10%. So we've got this nice round number, $3,000 a month. So if you tithe back to God 10% of that $3,000, what's 10% of $3,000? Any math whizzes in here this morning? $300 a month. $300 a month. So let's say in Connection Christian Church's realm of influence, and I think we have this, that we have roughly 100 adults in our sphere of influence. On average, we've been seeing roughly 100 people in our auditorium, in our adult seating worship time each week. And let's say everybody, and I know that's not the case, but that everybody is a working member of society and they're making this $3,000 a month. So let's say we've got 100 people in Connection Christian Church and they're all tithing 10% of that $3,000 a month, giving that $300 a month. What is 100 times $300? Add a couple zeros to it, $30,000 a month. 100 people giving $300 a month is $30,000 a month. Church, what Connection Christian Church needs right now, our literal needed budget per month is only $8,000. That would mean we would have $22,000 more above and beyond what our expenses are to play with. Church, what could we do with $22,000 more? I'd like to be full-time staff one day, and not that I don't like YFC, but it'd be nice to just have one main job to focus on. We'd like to hire a children's pastor. We'd like to do some more outreach, that we have hurting people in our community and within the walls of our church. And God says in Malachi, and we've beaten this verse in this month, but Malachi 3:10 says, "Put me to the test," says the Lord of hosts, "and if I will not open up the windows of heaven for you and pour down for you a blessing until there is no more need."